Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football podcast that's been overpromising and underdelivering since 2017. I'm your producer, Rob Diesendorf, here with my co-hosts Sean Brady and Scott Johnson, two fantasy football rivals that have been sabotaging each other for years, but they decided to come together for the better of the people. And they're here to give you advice and all the news you need to make your fantasy football team the best and make your friends feel like shit.
All for you.
How's it going, guys?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I'm doing pretty well. It's kind of weird talking into the mic. We've just been, for those of you listeners out there wondering, we've just been listening to Rob ramble off very off-color jokes for about 20 minutes straight. So I'm happy to be on the air.
I think it's been 13 minutes and 10 seconds about, because that intro was like 30 seconds.
I drank too much coffee today.
How many cups? Like
one. Yeah, I'm very caffeine sensitive. 1 cup is pretty much enough.
Yeah.
1 cup usually lasts me about a week.
Yeah, so that's 13 minutes.
He had this coffee at approximately 8 o'clock a.m. It's now 9:21 p.m. for those of you wondering, and
I won't
still in there, still in his system.
20 minutes. Try 11 hours to get in the system.
What's today's episode about?
All right, in today's episode, we're going to be going through our top 10 running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. For those of you out there that love kicker and defense action, maybe tune into the next pod, or just keep listening and maybe we'll get to it. Hint, we won't.
Just go to an ESPN pod or something like that.
Yeah, I heard they talk about kickers all day there.
Yeah, kicker. A lot of differences in the defense and the draft positions in ESPN.
If you're looking for kicker action, take Jankowski in the first round and you're golden. Everybody else, Let's get to our top 10s.
I like it. Get to the meat and bones. So I think we should start with some running backs. I think that's always the most controversial position for fantasy. Quarterbacks we'll get into, but they're kind of the same. 1 through 10, there's a little differences in terms of points per game. Wide receivers lately it's a passing league, so same thing goes, and tight ends are the same. Running back is really, in my opinion, where you're going to win or lose your league. And most of the time, the top running backs are going in the first couple of picks. This year is no exception. I think 2 years ago, it was mostly wide receivers. But in terms of top 10, we have the same guy going number 1 overall, and that's Le'Veon Bell. I think he's the bell cow running back for that team. That team has always been good. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Big Ben, starting to get a little up there in age, not as healthy as he has been in the past. But that passing game when he's in, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant when he's not suspended is elite. Opens up running lanes for Le'Veon Bell. He has no competition. I think D'Angelo Williams left that team. So in my opinion, he's the top and far and away top guy for running backs.
Yeah, I think these top 3 guys that we're going to get into are kind of in a league of their own because they all do 2 things. They are steady and they're also explosive. So they give you the best of both worlds. You can win your week with them, and you're also not going to lose any weeks with them, which is pretty much the most important thing you're looking for. You could take any of these top 3 guys and feel good about your first-round pick. But again, Bell is just by far, for me, the best. People will argue David Johnson or Zeke Elliott, but to me, it's not even close. We saw it last year, in the fantasy playoffs where Bell just single-handedly won people weeks. What, he put up like 50 points in the playoffs? It might have been 40-something, but
yeah,
if you had him that week, you made it to the next round, no matter who else you had on your roster, which is just what you're looking for when you take the first player off the board in the draft.
Yeah, and fantasy at its core is basically about minimizing risk, right? So you want to minimize as much risk as possible, get the most consistent player you can. Le'Veon's going to get you on a floor on a bad week 10 points. He can win you your league in the last couple of weeks, though. He gave 47 points in playoffs.
Exactly. And to just add before we move on, he's probably the most fun running back in the league to watch. You're not going to be disappointed if you own him and you tune in on Sunday and you put on Red Zone and say, oh, how are my boys doing? If you see Le'Veon Bell with the ball, it's scintillating. So yeah, that's another plus.
Yeah, and then going right along 2 and 3, David Johnson and then Ezekiel Elliott. We have the same guys. I think these 2, honestly, these 3, like we said, are pretty interchangeable. I think Le'Veon has a slight advantage just due to the team he's on. I think the Arizona Cardinals aren't going to be nearly as good as they were when Carson Palmer was hitting his stride a couple of years ago. David Johnson's all that team has. Ezekiel Elliott, I think the Cowboys are due for a massive downgrade in wins this year. I don't think they're going to be as good. I think Dak defenses are going to start figuring out Dak. That passing game might flounder a little bit. So in my opinion, and yours too, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott in that order. 4 and on is where we start having some differences here. So before he got hurt last year, he played 10 games. Melvin Gordon was one of the top running backs. So a horrible rookie year 2 years ago. He had no touchdowns, I believe. And he completely changed that last year with double-digit touchdowns. So I think with him, it's difficult to put him at 4, honestly, because 4 through 6 for me are very interchangeable, and we'll get into that. But I think Melvin Gordon is there to stay. He's consistent. That passing game is going to hum now with Mike Williams opening up things and Travis Benjamin healthy. New stadium, new change of pace, new change of scenery. I think Melvin Gordon is going to be our 4th guy running back.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at 6, and you mentioned 4 through 6 being kind of interchangeable. I see it the same way. For me, 4 to 6, the 4 to 6 running back range is typically, and it's not any different this year, the end of the first round or the very beginning of the second round. That's where you're picking these guys. Yep. I have LaShawn McCoy at 4. I pick him there simply because when he's healthy, which is, again, a risk you're going to have to be willing to take, he offers the same upside as the 3 above him. The only issue is then, that he does get hurt fairly often. So that's why I just like him 4 because, I'm trying to win my league when I take a guy in the first round. 5 is someone that we see a little bit differently. For 5 for me, that is Devontae Freeman. I think he's a first round guy. He's just solid. He's got an excellent backfield partner, which for most other guys would hurt him, but I think really helps him out. Having Tevin Coleman there to kind of take the burden off him when he needs it just lets him be effective in the passing game, effective between the tackles. He offers everything you ask for in a first or second round running back. And then 6.
And I think what they did, so just to go off of Devontae Freeman, they've really accentuated his strong points, right? He's not the biggest guy. He's not really an every down back. He can be, but long-term, season-long, he's not going to last that long. He hasn't really gotten hurt that much, but he's not a big guy. He can't sustain a lot of hits. He's a very big change of pace guy. He's quick. He's elite quickness, but I think they've utilized him really well with Tevin Coleman and him coming out of the backfield. Tevin Coleman takes like the brunt of the between the tackles kind of carries. Devontae Freeman's just going to try to make guys miss, but I still think he's not getting the lion's share of the carries in round 1 and 2. Like those top 3 guys, in my opinion, you want the guy that has all of the carries, because even then, if they have the skill, like the top 3, perfect, because they have the situation and the opportunity as well. If they're not as skillful, they need to have all the carries. So LaShawn McCoy is the same way. He's on my number 5. Melvin Gordon's the same way, but Devontae Freeman for me is 9, just because he doesn't have all those carries.
Yeah, I mean, for me, typically I kind of look at it the same way, but in this specific case with Freeman, I actually look at it a little differently. I was sleeping on him the last couple of years. Last year he came in as I think a second round pick, and I wasn't buying it. Was I wrong. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. Even though he doesn't get the lion's share of carries, he's still an RB1. If you just look at the numbers, it spilled it out. Exactly. And then, yeah, so I mean, I'm comfortable taking him in the late first, early second, and then again to round out my 4 to 6, Melvin Gordon, like you talked about, finally came through. Somebody that I loved coming out of college and had a very bad rookie year, but really showed what he could do last year.
Yeah, and I think with you and I for these top 6, so just our top 3 are the same. Then you have LaShawn McCoy, Devontae Freeman, Melvin Gordon, 4 through 6. I have Melvin Gordon, LaShawn McCoy, Lamar Miller, 4 through 6. Again, getting all the lion's share of the carries, and they have the skill to really back it up. Correct me if I'm wrong. I would be willing to take these guys all in the first round. Lamar Miller being maybe the 10th pick. After that, there's a little bit of drop off for me that I'm not taking them before the second round.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Yeah, so we agreed on something. We're not sabotaging each other.
I think we agree on the importance of running backs. I think that's what we're really getting at here. You can get a great wide receiver in the first round, but for me, if you don't have an RB1, you're not going to compete. It's just it's too tough.
Yeah, I think you could lose a league. The only situation that's pretty good where there's 2 guys is Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, where they could both really succeed. That's I can't think of any other backfield that can be sustained like that. And you really need a good guy a guy with a lion's share of carries to succeed.
Yeah, and while we're here, people are going to be nervous about them losing Kyle Shanahan to the 49ers as an offensive coordinator. I don't see a drop-off. If anything, I see the passing game regressing a tiny bit just because they were historically good last year. But I think getting Steve Sarkisian from Alabama will actually really help the running backs. I think if you look at Alabama last year, they had Bo Scarborough, who I just see lighting up NFL defenses down the road. He's that talented, but still, I think the scheme will really make both the running backs shine in Atlanta with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman.
Yeah. Now moving along to our second round guys. Basically, these are guys that we think have not elite skills like Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe not the lion's share carries like Melvin Gordon or LaShawn McCoy. This guy does. My number 7, my rankings, Jordan Howard on Chicago. The only fear with him is that he's a one-hit wonder. So he was a rookie.
I'm scared.
I think he was a 4th or 5th round pick. He was a late guy. They didn't really want him to be that bell cow. He's a small guy too, but he had 1,300 yards last year. I think he was second in the NFL behind Ezekiel Elliott, which is kind of cool to have 2 rookie running backs leading the league. But the only fear with him is that you could swing and miss pretty hard on this guy in the second round, early to mid-second round, Jordan Howard.
Yeah, for me, I don't put him in the second round group just because he's a little too scary for me. I do see the upside. I'm not, immune to how good his last year was, and he had some games where he really looked great. I'm just afraid that the Bears are going to be a dumpster fire. So I can't justify taking him in the second round. He just scares me a little bit too much. I'll let somebody else take him, and I'll take the next proven guy after that.
Realistically, his upside is the same as last year. Like in a good year, if you're banking on him in the second round, I would be happy with 1,300 yards again and 6 touchdowns and a couple of catches out of the backfield, because that team last year was probably going to be the same as they are this year. Chicago Bears are terrible last year. They're probably going to be terrible again. So realistically, that's the ceiling. I don't think he's going to get much better than that. The floor is that he could seed carries to a crowded backfield and maybe get like 800 yards. But I think it's a risk you'd be willing to take because he going into the season has the lion's share as of now.
Yeah, so he's your guy that you have as your second round rated running back. That I don't have. I have him maybe just outside of that. He's just missed my top 10. One guy that I have in my top 10 that you don't, and I think it's the only other difference we have actually, is Marshawn Lynch. For me, we talked about him a little bit in our free agency pod. I think he's walking into a situation where he's got a great offensive line in front of him. I think that offensive line is underrated in terms of run blocking. I think the Raiders want to be a little bit more balanced, and I think him coming off a year of just resting up, I'm sure I probably won't get a chance to draft him because people are going to go nuts about this guy coming back.
Yeah.
But I would probably take him towards maybe the latter half of the second round. I feel pretty good about that. Just because if he's your RB2, you can grab another RB3 and you'll be set. Because at worst you're getting a guy that's going to put the ball in the end zone when he gets the rock. He may not rack up a million yards this year, which I typically like, but I just think behind that line, the upside is just way too high to pass up on.
That free agency pickup by the Raiders was extremely good for the actual team, but for fantasy purposes, Marshawn Lynch, here's my theory. Marshawn Lynch has been out for a year. He's definitely not as electric as he was in the early days of Seattle, like 2012, 2011, when he was making a highlight reel every single time he touched the rock. He's built to take hits, but you can't do that when you're 29, 30, 31 years old. Not to the extent, and bounce back, not to the extent that you could when you were 26 in your prime. Running back is a very fickle position. That's why it's important to get guys that are in their primes, have the lion's share of the carries. Marshawn Lynch will have those carries. DeAndre Washington is kind of a change of pace back there. They had another rookie there last year too that was on and off for them, but
Jalen Richard. Yep.
Jalen Richard. I think it's really good for Derek Carr. It's going to take a lot of pressure off of him. He's not going to have to make as many plays, and he won't get as hurt. But I don't think he's going to be as good as everyone thinks he will be. So I'm waiting on him. If he's there in the 4th or 5th round, I'll think about taking him if I need some running back help. But for draft purposes, for me, I think you let someone take a waiver on him in the 2nd or 3rd round, and you get a guy that's more proven at this point in their careers.
Yeah, to me, if he's there in the 3rd, it's a lot easier to stomach. I would still feel risky about taking him in the 2nd. I may, I may adjust this ranking in time, but I would say in the third round, I'd feel decently comfortable with it. Second round, maybe not, because you're looking for a guy that needs to hit in the second round. For now, I see second round upside though. That's why he's up there.
Yeah,
and then now we get to a couple of guys that we all have in common in this latter second round group. I mentioned Lamar Miller here. You already talked about him a little bit. I think he'll have a much better year this year with no matter what happens, improved quarterback play. And I think that he's one guy again that kind of offers that blend of a nice floor, but also the opportunity to have a high ceiling with just how explosive he is. So for me, actually, I may flip him with Lynch because I'd feel more comfortable with him in the second round. Maybe not as excited, but I would still be very, very happy with him as my RB2. Or worst case RB1 if I go wide receiver early. And then these last two guys that I have. So I already talked about Lynch, who's my number 8, and then Miller, who's my number 10. My number 7 is Jay Ajayi, and my number 9 is DeMarco Murray. These guys are very, very different players in very different situations. But again, they're both the types of guys that are going to go in the second round. And I think this is where you can really win your draft or lose your draft with picks like these. I think Jay Ajayi, which we talked about the situation before with Jordan Howard being possibly a one-hit wonder. There's that same risk with Ajayi. I think just seeing him play last year makes me a little bit more comfortable than I would be with Jordan Howard, just because I think the Dolphins are a much better team than Chicago, because we get to see them twice a year as Jets fans, and we kind of wish we were at least as good as them. And I think he just has such a explosive game. He almost looks like Lynch at times, so Lynch in his prime, where he just bowls people over, and he's just, he's got enough burst to get by guys at the second level. So I think, again, you're getting hopefully not your RB1, but maybe, if you take a running back in the first round and you want to stock up, I would feel pretty good about having Jay Ajayi, because if you have that solid first rounder, you get the home run hitter with Jay Ajayi, I think you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and I think the way I look at it is if you get one of the top 3, Le'Veon Bell, Johnson, or Zeke, you can afford, obviously you kind of want to take a wide receiver after that, depending on where you're picking, first or third or second, whatever it is, or if one of those guys drops to you. Jay Ajayi is a good RB2 at that point. If you're drafting him as your RB1, I think you'll be disappointed. Again, could be a one-hit wonder kind of guy. His ceiling to me is just as good as last year. I don't think he's going to get much better. He had 2 incredible games where he had 200 yards plus, which is an NFL record that he broke. It's not sustainable. He's not going to do that again this year. Touchdown-wise, probably the same. I think he had 6 last year. Probably get the same. So I think realistically, he's a 1,000-yard runner, not much more, because it's a really big passing league and he can't catch, and 6 touchdowns. So late RB2 for me, probably round 3 guy. He's number 10 for me. DeMarco Murray, again, in the latter stages of my top 10 and yours too. He's number 8 for me. He's number 9 for you. To me, it's only a matter of time before he gets that backfield.
Yep.
He seeds carries in that backfield. He never was healthy in Dallas except for that 1 year. He was hurt in Philly. Last year, he had a great year with Tennessee. They have a really good line. I think that's a very underrated team.
Yep.
But it's, again, not sustainable. So I think you kind of have to take him in round 3 as an RB2. But, the downside is he could be hurt 10 games. And then Derrick Henry will take over that backfield. And I think once Derrick Henry has a stranglehold of that backfield and shows the skills off, it's over.
Yeah, to kind of wrap up our top 10s, I think one theme that is kind of, you might be wondering about listening, we only talk about 6 guys as RB1s. And I think that's really how I see the league right now. I kind of see the rest of these guys as RB2s. So I think you know which way we're going to tell you to go in the first round. I think you know which way I'm going in the first round too. I'm the type of guy that's willing to pass up on a guy like Mike Evans if it means I can get an RB1 like Melvin Gordon. Player by player upside wise, obviously I'd feel more excited about Evans. I like Gordon a lot. Don't get me wrong. I think Evans has a higher ceiling, but with the nature of the wide receiver position, I'm more likely to make up for it later in the draft than I am at running back. So I think no matter what, I'm going running back first round this year, and it's going to be one of those top 6 guys. If they all go 6 in a row, then I'll take a nice Julio Jones or Odell in the first round and feel great about it, because they did slip farther than they should. Still, RB1 is the key to a good team.
Think about it this way. The difference between one of the top 3 wide receivers and one of the top 3 running backs compared to wide receiver number 20 or running back number 20 is huge.
Huge.
So you get David Johnson compared to, a number 21, like Spencer Ware. Points per game wise,
I put Ware higher than that for the record. I like a Ware.
I would put him in 20 to 30 range, honestly. I think you're obsessed with him. I don't know why.
I'm not obsessed with him.
You're obsessed with the situation. He's not a good player. Not a good player. LSU, he barely was a starter.
That's very true. But he's one of those guys, we'll get into this for the moment. He's one of those guys that if he put up 5 more touchdowns, which obviously is saying a lot, yes. If you put up 5 more touchdowns.
8 touchdowns. Nothing to write home about.
If you look at his stats, if he put up 5 more touchdowns, he's an RB1.
All right. Agree to disagree. I think if you're going to get the you're an RB1 if you get those touchdowns. If you don't get those touchdowns, you're not an RB1.
Very true.
So, to me, running back-wise, compared to wide receivers, you get one of the top 3 guys, and you compare that of running backs, right? David Johnson, Zeke, and you compare that to the 15th guy. Let's just say it's Spencer Ware for the sake of argument. That comparison on a game-to-game basis is going to be at least 5 to 6 points at the very least. If Spencer Ware can even live up to that potential of 10 points per game, which I don't think he can. You can, in wide receivers, if you have Antonio Brown, if you miss out on Antonio Brown and get DeAndre Hopkins, the point per game differential is not that much greater it's not much greater than the difference between the first and the 15th running backs. So that's why it's so important to have one of the top running backs that has the lion's share of carries, that's skillful, that it could get you at least 12 points per game. And you can kind of make it up in wide receiver. To go to your point, the 15th wide receiver is, maybe Allen Robinson, who probably will have a better year than last year and a little bit more proven than Spencer Ware comparatively. So that's why you can make it up, the wide receivers up later on.
I think that's a pretty good way to segue into our wide receivers. These guys are guys that I would definitely take in top 2 rounds as far as the whole top 10 goes. Again, we kind of have a tier to their own with the top 4, I would say. Would you say 3 or 4 here? We have the same 1 through 4, except for we flipped the top 2 guys, which barely matters. But yeah, I'd say, is it 3 plus 4, or is it the top 4? Do you put Evans in with the top 3?
Yeah, top. I would clump them all together. I would say they're round 1 guys. Those 4 wide receivers. So to reiterate, we have Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, and Mike Evans. I would say those are all top 1, round 1 guys with the top 6 running backs that we had discussed.
Yep, I agree.
That's your round 1 right there. So I'd be happy with any of those guys. They're interchangeable in my opinion. Antonio Brown, I put him first. That's hoping that Big Ben stays healthy all year, which is a big question mark. Julio Jones hasn't really stayed healthy all his career. So that's why I put Antonio Brown first, Julio Jones second, Odell third, Mike Evans fourth. The third and fourth guys are just coming into their primes, Odell and Mike Evans. And they're getting additional help. So Mike Evans has Deshaun Jackson to open up the field for him, and he's a target machine. Same with Odell, target machine, young guy. Now he has Brandon Marshall opening up the field. I wouldn't be surprised if those guys are the top 1 and 2. But you have to put Antonio Brown and Julio Jones first, I think.
Yeah, and I agree. I have Julio first and Antonio Brown second. You're splitting hairs. It really comes down to your personal preference at that point. But I will say I'd be much more excited to have a later pick so I can grab a Odell Beckham Jr. and then get a jump on the second round, because
I agree.
Honestly, I think Odell and Mike Evans, if I had to bet, I would suggest one of them is the top number 1 wide receiver at the end of the year and not Julio or Antonio Brown. I think, like you hit the nail on the head, Julio gets hurt and Big Ben gets hurt, and that hurts Antonio Brown from time to time. So I'd feel better having a later pick grabbing Odell or Mike Evans.
I would feel much better about that. If you don't get one of the top 3 picks and you get one of those home run running backs, don't be alarmed if you get 8, 9, 10. And Odell kind of falls to you. He might not fall. Honestly, he's going like 5th overall. But if you get Odell and Mike Evans, you get a jump start in that wide receiver position. You can wait until round 4 or 5 to get another wide receiver because the difference is not that much greater. And then you could stock up on some Jay Ajayi or Devontae Freeman type running backs in rounds 2 and 3.
Yep.
I think that's a really good strategy.
Yeah, so that's our top 4. I think we have the same 3 guys for the next 3 picks again. These are my round 2 stud wide receivers, these next three. And we have them in different order, but actually I think they're all mixed up here. But I have in order T.Y. Hilton, Jordy Nelson, A.J. Green. To be honest with you, the more I think about it, the more I want to put A.J. Green at 5, just because he's the most talented overall of those three. He, again, like, is going to be the only guy on the Bengals doing anything offensively. So that's the upside for me. I think there's going to be a lot of garbage time in Cincinnati this year, and I think he'll benefit from it. So I might be moving him up in the next couple weeks. Jordy, again, Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target. Don't have to say anything else. And T.Y. Hilton is just a dynamo. Absolutely so explosive. He'll win you a week 4 or 5 times a year, and that's all you can really ask for.
Yeah, it's interesting. These 3 guys are in that top tier, the second tier, if you will, for different reasons, right? Jordy Nelson is on a really good team with Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback, so they throw it a ton, and he's his favorite target. Hopefully he stays healthy again because he had a great comeback year last year.
Yep.
T.Y. Hilton, Colts defense has historically been terrible. They've always been playing from behind. Andrew Luck spreads it around but has a really big arm. T.Y. Hilton is his best deep threat. A.J. Green, one of the most talented wide receivers. I would say top 3 with Julio and Odell, talent-wise. A.J. Green, in terms of physicality and being a freak, he basically is. And that team's going to be behind a lot. I think Cincinnati's going to be bottom 3 NFL record this year. Maybe 4 if you include the Jets, which we should. But for all different reasons, those guys are there. Round 2 guys, for sure. And I think you can't go wrong with one of them as your wide receiver 1.
Let me make the case for Hilton real quick, because I feel like he gets a little bit of hate for some reason in fantasy.
From me, he does.
From you, he historically does, but you're finally starting to come around. This guy is, if you look at him, you just look at him and go, that's not a wide receiver 1. He doesn't look like a wide receiver 1. He's tiny, but he's so explosive. And I promise you, if you draft him, and again, you put on Red Zone and there's 3 minutes left in the Colts game, and you say, all right, it's time for T.Y. to be T.Y., it's gonna happen. He is so much fun.
Part of the reason I hate him is because I lose to him all. Basically, you have him like every year.
Always.
And I play you, and the last 2 minutes of the game, he scores an 80-yard touchdown, and all of a sudden you win by 5 points because you get 17 points from him in 2 minutes. So he has that potential. It's just a matter of being consistent. He's always one of the top 5 in yardage. He had like 1,400 yards last year.
Yep.
Touchdowns is he's getting the home run touchdowns. He's not a red zone guy. He's not a typical prototype wide receiver like A.J. Green or even Jordy Nelson. So that knocks him a bit for me, but you still can't go wrong as a wide receiver 1.
For
moving
me,
along.
Hold on, we just add one more thing. For me, what you just mentioned is kind of the reason I love him as a wide receiver 1. I think his floor is so high, which people don't realize. They just see him as his home run threat. His floor is so high because he puts up so much yardage. He's gonna move the chains every single game. That's how he gets his points. Touchdowns at that point are just a bonus. Absolutely.
Yeah. Strategy-wise for wide receivers, it's all regression to the mean. What I mean by that, if you get 6 touchdowns, but the average amount of touchdowns you get because of your size and your team's ability to get in the red zone, all these different factors, is really 10, and you get 6 touchdowns one year, you're more likely to get closer to 14 touchdowns the year after, just to get to that mean. So touchdowns aren't I don't look at that as a stat. I look at, in terms of floors for wide receivers, I look at yards. That's really going to stay consistent. There's no regression of the mean for yards. There is for touchdowns. You can get very lucky. You look at Calvin Johnson when he had almost 2,000 yards a couple of years ago. I think he had 5 touchdowns because he got tackled on the 1-yard line 6 times. If you didn't get tackled on the 1-yard line 6 times, he would have had
one of the greatest years ever for a wide receiver.
Yeah. And it could have been even better because he didn't get those touchdowns. So touchdowns is a little wonky. Yards is what you want to look at for floor and consistency with wide receivers. And T.Y. Hilton does have that.
I'm gonna add in. It's kind of a nice segue to our next 2 guys. If you are gonna go touchdown wise, watch the games, okay? Because there's some wide receivers out there that get touchdowns just because they're excellent in the red zone. Okay, my number 8 is a guy that is way up there with the top 3 guys as a red zone target. I think DeAndre Hopkins, as I mentioned before, I'm not even going to mention what happened to quarterback last year, but this year should be improved no matter what happens, and they should be improved in the quarterback department. He's a guy that is just unstoppable in the red zone. You cannot cover him. He's the kind of guy that's open when he's covered, and I'm so excited to see him bounce back this year. So I have him at number 8. Might be a little high based on just the numbers last year, but in terms of just what you're getting talent-wise there, I'd be pretty happy with him as my wide receiver 2 or my low-end wide receiver 1.
Yeah, it was a weird year for him last year, right? The year before, he had a breakout year. He had about 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. That was 2 years ago, not last year, with like 4 different quarterbacks. Last year, he had Brock Osweiler for a good chunk of games. I think it's just a testament to the fact that Osweiler really can't be a starting quarterback. But a really weird year for him. You would think he would be able to overcome that if he had 4 quarterbacks the year before. But I think there's, I know I said yardage-wise, there's no regression to the mean. I think there's regression to the mean for him just because he's so talented. You can't cover him. He's one of the best one-on-one wide receivers. You throw it up to him. He's not even a tall guy, but he's very physical, and he's a freak athlete. I think he's 6'1", 215. But I don't think you can really go wrong with him if he has the right situation. And Tom Savage and Deshaun Watson will definitely shore up that quarterback position. I think they're a little bit more quote-unquote moldable than Brock Osweiler is. So I have him at 9. You have him at 8. And then the opposite guy that we both have is Michael Thomas, who Brandon Cook's gone. He's the number one guy. He showed it last year in limited action as a rookie. I think he was one of the most underrated players last year. No one really talked about him. That guy's going to be dynamite this year. He has the lion's share of targets there. Drew Brees is going to throw it to him constantly.
Yeah, we kind of touched on him in our free agency pod. Just talking about how Ted Ginn going to the Saints is only going to open the field up and it's also not going to rob targets from him because Ted Ginn isn't a guy that's going to catch 80 balls. He's going to at most catch like 40 to 50 balls. But while he's on the field, he's just opening things up for the rest of the Saints offense. And I think Michael Thomas is the number one beneficiary. He's great in the red zone. He's a yardage mover, and he's super, super physical. And I think he'll show a little bit more explosiveness this year also. I think, we kind of saw him as a Marcus Colston 2.0, which he might be. But I think just by, the factor of him maybe getting some different looks, I think he might, roll off some long, deep touchdowns this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ohio State he did. They had Devin Smith to kind of open things up for him. I think they were there at the same time for like a year or two. But I agree. I think he's Marcus Colston. That's his floor, his future floor with that team. So I think there's only room to grow. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the top 5. Draft-wise, those two guys, I would say late round 2, early round 3 for both of them.
Completely agree.
I think if you reached a little bit, you can't go wrong. I wouldn't go till the beginning of round 2. I would wait until the end of round 2 for either one of those guys. Number 10, we are different. You have Amari Cooper. I have Brandon Cooks. So 2 explosive guys. Brandon Cooks on New England now. I think that team needs a deep guy since Randy Moss left. Edelman is more of a slot guy. Chris Hogan was kind of a cute pick coming into the year, but now that Brandon Cooks is there, I think he's done. They have Dwayne Allen as a tight end, Gronkowski still, if he's healthy. That team's going to be unbelievable on offense, especially passing-wise. Hopefully Tom Brady can get him the ball deep. I think he still can, but Brandon Cooks, I'm expecting top 10 production. I think 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns is not out of the running. I think he's going to be like a T.Y. Hilton kind of guy for that team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have Cooks at like 11 or 12, so it's really not much of a difference. I think the thing to keep in mind here is these guys are, again, if you're going to look at these guys at the end of round 2, the beginning of round 3, you're probably sitting on a roster that has Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, or Zeke Elliott on it. So now you're looking for a wide receiver 1. I think both of these guys are at their best wide receiver 1s, but they also, wouldn't prototypically be seen as them as a wide receiver 1. Cooks, again, kind of like what we touched on with Hilton, small, explosive, obviously super talented, but hasn't proven it with his team yet, which is the real reason that he's not higher on this list because he absolutely shredded some teams last year. And for me, Cooper, I have Cooper ahead of him for the sole purpose of continuity with Derek Carr. Sorry, I almost said David Carr. And again, he's another one of those guys that if you look at the yardage and you say, oh, what if he tacked on a few more touchdowns? He's a wide receiver 1. He put up a ton of yards last year. He just didn't get in the end zone for whatever reason. I know Crabtree's good down there, but I think it starts to even out a little bit more this year. I think Crabtree is much older than Cooper, first off. I think Lynch will probably get a little bit more work in the red zone as well. But to me, Cooper, there's no way he doesn't catch more touchdowns this year. He's just way too good of a player for that. And he's someone I'd feel pretty excited about as my wide receiver too. And I'd feel decent about as my, my quasi wide receiver 1 if I take 2 running backs.
Yeah, see, for me, Amari Cooper is always overrated in drafts. I think he went on average 18 last year. You're drafting a wide receiver at 18. You're expecting him to be a wide receiver 1.
Yep. And
he didn't put up that production. So, and I think that was his second year last year, right? He was a rookie, and then last year was his second year. To me, he hasn't. I'm not denying his talent level or his situation, because now with Marshawn Lynch, it opens things up for the passing game. But I am questioning if he's actually ready to take it to the next step this year. I think his floor, again, I'm not denying his talent. I think that could get you a ton of yards, maybe 1,300, 1,400, maybe. I would say closer to 1,200 for him, realistically. Crabtree was the touchdown guy. They have 2 good tight ends. Marshawn Lynch is going to take a ton in the red zone. So for me, he's like a top 15 guy. I think I have him at like 14, 15. I wouldn't be surprised if he vaults into the top 10, but realistically, his floor for me is like a wide receiver 2, mid-tier wide receiver 2, which is like round 4 kind of production there. So I would take him in round 4, beginning of round 4, maybe round 3, but I'm not trusting him as like a wide receiver, maybe a wide receiver 1, for sure wide receiver 2. That's where we differ there.
For me, yeah, I wouldn't feel great about him as a wide receiver 1. I'd say he's a wide receiver 2. And I will just preface this by saying that out of the top 20 that we've went over, so the top 10 running backs and now top 10 wide receivers, he's at the bottom. He's behind all those guys. And honestly, there's a few other running backs I would take before I take Cooper. Guys like Todd Gurley, Jordan Howard, who you mentioned, who I didn't have in my top 10. Those are guys that I would take before Cooper, just because the upside is greater and the floor is probably greater too. But
yeah, I agree.
I think I agree with you that Cooper will be overdrafted, which sucks.
He always is, because he's so talented. He's so flashy. Meanwhile, you could probably get the production from like an Alshon Jeffrey who will go around later.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would love to have Cooper on my team, but again, he's probably going to go too early for my taste anyway.
Yeah,
so
I'm waiting on him. I don't want him this year.
All right, should we take a break from our to hear from more of our sponsors? I don't know if they're ready for us over there.
I think we do have some sponsors over there. Yeah.
That neighbor's pesky dog won't stop barking. Maybe it's time to call Pennyweather. Unqualified is sponsored by Pennyweather Dog Removal Service. It's just one guy. If your neighbor's dog is annoying the shit out of you, call Pennyweather. He'll make that goddamn dog disappear. Pennyweather. $3.99 a piece.
A piece of what? All right, let's get into some tight ends here. And this position is a lot different from running back and wide receiver for me, because the tier at the top is one guy and one man alone. And he's not even really a man. He's more of a Greek god, Rob Gronkowski.
A party god.
The god of parties. Rob Gronkowski. You could say what you want. Yeah, he might fall off a cliff this year. Yeah, he might break his back for good this year. But he is just, when he, I think he will be healthy. When he's healthy, he's by far the best tight end in the league. Maybe the best tight end of all time, physically, like skills wise.
I couldn't agree more. But that guy's been hurt and put on the IR and missed at least 3 games.
So many times.
3 years. It's like way too many. So, like, you need a guy that's healthy. To me, even, this is going to sound blasphemous, but even a guy like Delaney Walker, who you know is going to play 16 games, has a better chance of being the number one guy than Gronkowski to me, because Gronkowski is one of the best tight ends of all time, but he's never healthy 16 games. So
okay,
I have him at number 2.
Before you even move on, lend me your ear for a second. Let me to walk you through a strategy here. If you do wind up taking Gronk, okay, we just went through our running backs and wide receivers. Okay, I'll tell you why. Okay. We went through our running backs and wide receivers. Let's say you take one of each in rounds 1 and 2, and then you're sitting in round 3 and there's nobody you like, and Gronk is staring at you in the face, and you know that Gronk wins you games when he's in. Okay, so let's say you take Rob Gronkowski, round 3. Then maybe round 10, right after you take your quarterback, maybe you take another lower tier tight end. like maybe one of the guys we have towards the end of mine. I have him at number 10, Jack Doyle. If you pair Rob Gronkowski with Jack Doyle, you play Gronk when he's healthy. When he's not, you play Jack Doyle. You're getting tight end 1 production. Because at the very least, you're getting the average replacement for when Gronk is not there. And I don't see why that can't work. Obviously it might be a little steep and you're, kind of lessening the options you have later in the, maybe around 10, you might hit a home run with somebody at the running back or wide receiver position.
Or quarterback.
But if you hit the home run with Gronk, none of that matters because you're going to win your league because you're going to get wide receiver 1 production from your tight end spot, which no one else is going to get.
Here's the thing. You're drafting Gronk as if he'll be a home run hit. Everyone is. Just as an aside, you're drafting him in round 3 because in your head, it's Gronkowski. He's going to do really well, but the risk, no one's taking into account the risk that he's going to get hurt. He will get hurt. And last year, what we saw was he got hurt in games, and then when he was supposed to be quote unquote healthy, the next week put up 1 catch for 11 yards or 0 catches for 0 yards. That's honestly, that could happen. That's the risk you take with him is season long, he's probably not going to be healthy, but let's say he plays 13 games. Yeah, he's going to put up wide receiver, like literally be the best tight end for those 13 games and maybe even outproduce everyone that plays 16 games. But last year we saw he got so hurt that he was playing a game but still didn't produce. So it's even riskier. What I saw last year was a big drop-off from the years before because no one really took that into consideration. Like, yeah, he played 13 games, 2012, but he was so good and he was so worth my first or second round pick. I'm not going to take him until round 4 or 5. If he's sitting at round 5, that's going to make me a lot more comfortable that I have 4 stud running backs and wide receivers. But otherwise, I'm staying away from him because I know the minimum for him is he's going to play 8 games, and in the 8 games he's going to be limited still. That's why I have Travis Kelce, who's a lot more steady, if you will. Not steady. He's a lot healthier, and he proved that he could be a top 1 or 2 guy last year with the amount of yards he got. Remember we talked about the floor with wide receivers before is yards. Travis Kelce is only going to get more touchdowns, especially with the running game kind of weak. Their red zone threats aren't that good. Jeremy Macklin's not a big guy. They don't really have a big guy besides Kelce. Regression of the mean, he's going to get more touchdowns. He's healthy. He gets yards already. He's the number 1 guy for me because he's going to be out there 16 games. And in the 16 games he's going to be completely on point. Gronkowski, they got Dwayne Allen now. They got Brandon Cooks now. Running game, they have a ton of guys that could catch out of the backfield. Rex Burkhead, James White, Deion Lewis. To me, that signals to me that offense is starting to change and they're starting to figure out what to do without Gronk. So I don't love him this year. To me, I'm avoiding him completely.
Yeah, to me, I think late 3rd, and that's probably the earliest I'm willing to go. Again, I think he'll probably won't be there at that point. I will say, for you liking him at 4 or 5 in the 4th or 5th round, he won't be there. I don't think Kelce or Olsen Definitely or Reed will be there either. So I think you're going to have, if you want a top tight end, you're going to have to take him before, probably in round 5 at the latest. I think most of them will go in round 4, which I don't agree with.
I'm waiting until round 5 for a tight end.
Yeah, honestly. I'm probably waiting later, to be honest with you, because...
Yeah, there's a ton of flyers that we have in our list here that you can get in round 10 or 11 that could produce tight end 1 production, like Tyler Eifert a couple years ago, 2 years ago. He was hurt last year. He was a top 10 tight end. I got him in the last round of our draft.
Exactly.
Laney Walker, same thing.
For the most part, it's such a touchdown dependent position that I'm not willing to risk a starter level pick. But you're talking about the top 5. You're talking about your 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex. I'm not willing to risk that to go say, okay, this tight end will be marginally better at catching touchdowns than this guy later. It's just too risky for me.
Yeah, I think what we saw last year was the slow decline of the tight end position. I think that it's just a grueling position in your body.
Yep.
These guys can't stay healthy. They're blocking. They're taking hits. They're big targets, so they have big safeties on them, and they're doubled with a linebacker, and then they take a big hit after a catch. Gronk is targeted completely during games. So it's a tough position. They have a lot of weight they're running around with. I think we saw last year that it's not as important a position as it was 3 years ago even. It's amazing how the NFL changes, but look at us now. We're a passing league, and it's really, realistically, more teams are doing 3 wide receiver sets and 2 running backs, especially the Patriots, for example. They're going to do that a lot because I think they're going to try to wing it without Gronk. They won a Super Bowl without Gronk. Look at them. They were fine. 3 and 4, we have the same. 3, 4, 5, and 6, we actually have the same 4 in different orders. These guys are round 6 and up. I wouldn't take them before that. They do have the lion's share of those tight end catches. Jordan Reed, Greg Olsen, Delaney Walker, Jimmy Graham. To me, the first 2, Jordan Reed and Greg Olsen, I would take a round before the next 2, but they're kind of interchangeable at that point. I think Jimmy Graham was the biggest jumper for me this offseason. No one was expecting him to do well in Seattle. He killed it
except
last
me.
year.
Except me when he first got traded.
Of course, only you.
Yeah, I mean, again, those 4 guys, having said what you just said about tight end being kind of in a steady decline, those 4 guys you just named are guys that I'd feel very comfortable with as my tight end. Partially just because they are all freaks of nature. Jordan Reed is basically a wide receiver that's just way too big. Olsen's probably the most complete tight end in the entire position group. Jimmy Graham, again, a wide receiver that plays tight end, basically. And then Delaney Walker, which you mentioned before, is so steady, just such a great football player, and really, really good. And with a very good up-and-coming quarterback, that's a pretty nice spot. He's a guy that always gets overlooked for some reason. I'd be pretty happy with him in round 6 or 7, I'd say. If I take him in 6 or 7, I'd be pretty thrilled, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's the steadiest guy along with Greg Olsen. I think that, and even Travis Kelce, but he's going before them. Delaney Walker and Greg Olsen, are going to get you yards. Touchdowns, it's tougher. Greg Olsen's getting up there in age. So is Delaney Walker. I think they're about the same age, like 32. They have competent quarterbacks throwing it to them. It's only a matter of time before eventually they fall off the cliff, but I think they have another couple of years yards-wise in them. Jordan Reed is more of a risk to me, and Jimmy Graham is more of a risk because you're not sure if he can sustain that in Seattle with that, running game. With now they have Eddie Lacy. So those are a little more, flyers, if you will. 7 for me, though. This guy's going to kill it. I wouldn't be surprised if he's top 5 tight ends. I have him at 7, so it's not that far off. Jack Doyle.
Doyle rules.
Doyle rules. No more Dwayne Allen. Andrew Luck loves his tight ends. No more competition that I could think of. I think he's going to get. I think he could surpass 1,000 yards. I don't know if he has it in him. I would say 800 is more realistic, and 8 touchdowns. I think that's the tight end number 1 production.
I have him at number 10. I kind of touched on it before. I don't think he'll get quite that much yardage, but I think the touchdowns will be there. I think Luck loves his big targets in the red zone. I think you hit the nail on the head. Losing Dwayne Allen is going to just mean great things for Jack Doyle. He was obviously usable last year. And things are only looking up for him. So I like him as a tight end 1. I'd feel pretty good with him very late in the draft. I think he's a steal. And then the 3 guys I have listed before him, Kyle Rudolph, Zach Ertz, and Tyler Eifert, all guys with great upside, all guys with quarterbacks that love to throw the tight end.
Yep.
You have Sam Bradford, who loves tight ends. Eifert's got...
Check down king.
Yeah, Dalton loves Eifert in the red zone when Eifert's healthy. He's another, injury-prone tight end. And then you got Carson Wentz, who we kind of are going to touch on. He's not in my top 10, but we touched on him in free agency. He's a guy that's going to be a good quarterback this year.
Yeah.
And I think Ertz is really going to benefit there. I think Jeffrey and Torrey Smith open up the middle of the field for Ertz a little bit. Young quarterback looking to a young tight end. I think it's a great combo. I think that combo is going to grow in the coming years as well.
Yeah, Ertz, Sproles, and Jordan Matthews are going to light the inside of the field up. That's underrated. One of the more underrated rosters on the team. I think Ertz can be one of the more underrated parts of that offense too. I have him at number 8. Kyle Rudolph, I'm not as high on. I think he's kind of maxed his talent level out, but Sam Bradford loves him if he stays there. And then Tyler Eifert, if he stays healthy, again, top 5 potential. That team is going to throw a lot, but I think AJ Green kind of has the most red zone targets there. I think Tyler Eifert can realistically get to his touchdown dependent levels of 8 touchdowns, but pretty similar guys. Can't really go wrong with these guys. I would say the last 4, Jack Doyle, Zach Ertz, Rudolph and Eifert for both of us.
Round 10, maybe?
Yeah, you're taking round 10. Yep. I think you get solid, competent running backs, like at least three running backs, at least three wide receivers, and then, quarterback, and you could get some more stocked up running backs and wide receivers, and then take one of these guys. That's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait on the tight end. I'm not going to take Gronk or Kelsey because they're getting overdrafted. Same with Reed, Olsen, Delaney Walker, or Jimmy Graham. I'm going to wait for one of these four guys later on in the draft.
Yeah, and I think round 10 is going to be a spot where we look to draft quarterbacks too.
Okay, folks, it's time for another round of hot takes. That's where I name a bunch of things, and Sean and Scott both have to give me a hot take on that thing in under 10 seconds. Boys, you ready to play?
Ready.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. Hot take number 1, alarm clocks.
Oh, man, everyone's worst enemy. You would not wish an alarm clock waking you up on your worst, the person you like least in the world. That just honking sound at 6 a.m. Nobody likes them. Everybody hates them. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Scott.
Worst fucking thing in the world. Hate them. I have 4 every single morning, and I barely wake up anyway because I just end up a grouchy piece of shit after I hear them. I had this thing called Clocky. You hit the snooze button, and then the next time it goes off, it rolls off and runs around your floor, and that pissed me off even more. So alarm clocks suck.
Oh my god,
it was hard.
All right, here we go.
You got deep there.
Hot take number 2: wearing flip flops.
Okay, summer, yes. If you're gonna wear them with jeans, just a hard no. Don't do it. If you're gonna wear them in the winter, just don't do it. Just think twice and don't do it. Period.
Who's wearing them in the winter?
You'd be surprised.
Me. No, I'm not.
Scott, over to you.
A lot of different things. Tough to get in 10 seconds. With pants, no. The ones with straps that the people in like Disney World wear, no. Flip flops in the summertime, yes. To the beach,
Birkenstocks.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
Birkenstocks, whatever the fuck they're called. The Adidas ones that have one strap, love them for walking around.
Love them.
The house.
Oh yeah.
Going to the grocery store, picking up a grocery, coming back. So a lot of different sandals. Overall, B+.
Real quick, if you're gonna wear them in the winter, get a pair of moccasins. They're the same thing but much comfier.
What?
All right, here we go. Next hot take. Articles.
That's a good word.
Here we go. Hot take. Sean, we're over to you. Articles about things that are good or bad for you.
Fuck you to whoever's writing it. You don't know what's good or bad for me. That's my hot take. I'll decide what's good or bad for me.
Is that it?
That's it.
Scott.
It's hot. That's a hot take. It's very hot. It's warm. It's warm. What was the thing? Articles about what are good or bad for you? Yeah.
Articles about things that are good or bad for you.
Leave me the fuck alone. Stay out of my business. I know what's good and bad for me, and I'll do what's bad for me most of the time. Eat pizza at midnight. Take a nap on my couch until 4 a.m. I know it's not good for you, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Show me research.
Yeah. I don't need
If
your
it's research-backed, then I'll pay attention.
Yeah.
It's got research.
Basically, I'm skeptical of everything, so just take your article and throw it out the window.
All right, here we go. Next hot take. Brown rice versus white rice.
White rice, I don't need to say anything else. White rice.
White
period.
rice. And jasmine rice if you can, or basmati rice.
Oh, yeah, jasmine.
I tried this brown basmati rice, or jasmine brown rice. It was terrible. Brown rice sucks.
Okay, moving on. Here we go. Wearing a backpack.
All the time. I wear my backpack maybe every other day. I use it for school. I use it for when I'm carrying my laptop around if I'm going anywhere. I use it for carrying clothes if I need to. It's just the most convenient way to carry your stuff. Period.
Scott.
Wear it to work every single day. Again, computer. I've done it on weekend trips. Wore my backpack and packed clothes in it. Keep my contacts in there, glasses, deodorant, which I use like every day, multiple times a day. Backpacks, A++. All
right, I got one for... Wait. I'm going to build out that for you two. Here's my hot take. 1 strap or 2 on the backpack?
If you're wearing a 1-strap backpack, you're probably in middle school, and you're probably also a fucking loser.
Yeah. Very true.
You probably love trail mix with no M&Ms in it.
Ugh, with just raisins and shit and nuts, like the healthy ones.
Oh, yeah.
No, Sean, you're talking about like if it has 2 straps, but if you wear it
has 2 straps, but do you wear it with 1 or 2?
See, yes. I always start with 2, right? And then my back gets sweaty, like it always does. And then I go to 1 to let my back air out. And then if it looks kind of weird and people are looking at me, I'll put 2 back on, and then I'll start sweating again. It's a vicious cycle.
The vicious cycle right there.
You gotta go back and forth, man. And I always go on the right shoulder if I'm doing a one strapper. Never on
Always.
the left. Like
dominant. Gotta go dominant shoulder.
You gonna go on your left?
All right, here we go. Next one. Hot take. Cheap sunglasses.
Need them. I have 1 pair of Ray-Bans, and I will have a million pairs of cheap sunglasses just for going to the beach, random stuff. You don't have to worry about them. Don't wear stuff you have to worry about breaking. Don't buy it in the first place. Why are you buying it if you're afraid of wearing it? You're just buying fear at that point. Don't do it. Buy cheap sunglasses. They'll last you forever because they cost about 25 cents.
25 cents is a really cheap pair. I only buy cheap sunglasses. I had a phase where I had Ray-Bans, then I lost them in the ocean, or then I lost them on the tennis court, being a schmuck, drunk. So no, never gonna buy them again. $10 compared to $120 looks the same. Maybe it lasts 5 years less, but big whoop.
All right, finally, werewolf and vampire movies.
Pretty brutal overall. Watch What We Do in the Shadows. Hilarious vampire movie. And werewolves are in there too. But on the whole, awful film genre.
Really dumb movies. Never got into the Twilights. I don't even know what other kind of movies there are. There's like Underworld or Lycans or some bullshit. I'm tagging back in when you're done. Sorry. Yeah, all right. Well,
sorry.
I'm not done yet. Stupid, like, middle school like movies. D-. Go ahead. Tag
Blade. Blade is the exception. Gotta watch Blade.
Blade's actually cool.
Great
There's a new
movies.
one coming out too.
I agree.
2049. That one looks cool.
Oh yeah.
But besides that, I'll give it a D, not a D-.
No. You're not Blade Runner. Blade with Wesley Snipes. That's what you gotta watch.
Oh, it's different.
Different, yes, different. Yo, trust me. I'm gonna make you watch. I'm gonna pry your eyelids open and make you watch Blade. Great action movie.
Actually, I've never seen it. I just like decided to be like, oh yeah, cool.
Nice. For the time being, let's get through our top tier quarterbacks, guys that are going to go early in the draft. We have the same top 2 in order. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. We don't need to talk about them too much. I'd say probably round 3 is where they're going to go. Probably wouldn't take them there, but that's where they're going to go. And honestly, they rightfully should go there. I'm just not comfortable taking a quarterback there. I think every time I do, I kind of regret it. But there are games where it's, you head into the season, you go, okay, I don't have to worry about quarterback the whole year. And that's a great feeling. But you got to live on the edge a little bit, in my opinion, and take the positions that are going to be depleted. Quarterbacks don't get hurt at the same rate as other players. So you can wait till later, grab a couple of good ones, hope one of them pops. But if you're going to take a quarterback early, it's got to be one of these 2 guys. If you reach for, let's see, who do we have that's in the middle tier here? Like a Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was great last year, don't get me wrong. But he's going to regress this year. They were historically good last year. It's not going to happen this year.
Right.
They changed offensive coordinators. That always hurts passing games first. Running games should be all right, I think, as I touched on before. But don't take Matt Ryan in round 3. You heard it here first. If you do, you're probably going to regret it.
You're an idiot.
If you don't, then enjoy a nice risky call that paid off for you. But
being smart.
I'd much rather take a nice RB2 or wide receiver 2 in round 3 than take a guy like Matt Ryan. But if I'm going to take a quarterback there, it's going to be Rodgers or Brady.
Quarterbacks always go too early. The top one guys go too early every single year because you never know if they're going to be another top 2 guy. Maybe it'll be number 6, and then at that point, you just paid for what you thought was a number 1 or 2 guy, and he gave you number 6 production, which you could have gotten in round 8 or 9.
Exactly.
So I'm not even thinking about taking Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Tom Brady, 40 now? He has a lot of weapons around him, so I think he'll still be fine. I think he has another 2, maybe 3 years in him. That's it. But it's going to come eventually. I think in the Super Bowl we saw he wasn't that good up until the last quarter. Of that game. Aaron Rodgers, he's getting up there now, 34. He still has those weapons, so I think he'll be. These guys will be top 5. I'm not taking them before round 4 or 5 though. And even then, the strategy I have in place is to stock up on running backs and wide receivers and wait on quarterbacks. So going along, we have pretty much the same guys after that in different orders. I have Drew Brees next, with I think will really benefit from Michael Thomas being the undisputed number 1 guy and Ted Ginn opening up the field. Andrew Luck 4, Matt Ryan 5 in that order. Those guys are, kind of interchangeable in my opinion. Hopefully Matt Ryan sustains that level of production that he had. I think there's a drop-off there. Andrew Luck is always pretty good, but he's not what we thought he would be, which is Aaron Rodgers good. He's a number, 5 quarterback kind of good. And I think he'll stay there. Those guys are kind of interchangeable, though. I'm waiting until like round 7 to get them.
Yeah, I agree. I have them in a different order, but again, I kind of view them all the same. Luck, I have Luck, then Ryan, then Breeze. I feel the safest with Luck just because we've seen his floor, and it doesn't scare me too much. Matt Ryan, last year was great, but before that, he was really not a top 10 fantasy QB.
No, not at all.
So that's a little bit riskier. I still think he'll be good this year. Anyone throwing to Julio Jones is going to be a good quarterback
Right.
fantasy-wise. But, again, I think Luck's got the upside over him. And I think Breeze, again, the age thing scares me. So he's my number 5. I still love him. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL, but, I'm not taking him
losing
early
Cooks
either.
hurts, though.
It does, exactly.
After that, we have some differences there. I have a guy at number 6 that you don't even have in your top 10, Marcus Mariota. He was electric last year before he got hurt. I think that team only got better with Corey Davis. The addition of Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray are going to free up a lot of passing lanes for Rashard Matthews, for Corey Davis. Marcus Mariota, offseason reports his leg is doing really well. I think he
broke it, right?
Yes, a fibia, I believe. But,
okay.
Offseason, he's been rehabbing. He'll be fine for week 1, I believe. But before he went down, which I believe was like week 10, he was giving top 5 production. So I think he'll get back to that. I think I have him at number 6 right now. What I think will happen is he's not getting drafted until much later. This guy, in my opinion, could get you top 10 production.
That's your guy.
Later.
It's your guy.
That's my guy. I'm probably going to take him in round 11 or 12 where he's going.
Yeah, I'd be happy with him there too. I have the guys listed right here ahead of him just for the purpose of we've seen him do it for longer. I like him a lot as a player. I'd be great with him as one of 2. If I have 2 QBs, if he's one of them, I'm happy because I think he offers that upside that you're talking about. For me, I have Russell Wilson at 6. I see you have Wilson at 7. Again, this guy is just Houdini. He has no offensive line help and still is a serviceable fantasy QB year after year. I feel pretty safe with him. And then to me, number 7 is a guy I love. I don't know. Do you have him in your top 10?
Number 10.
He's number 10 for you. Derek Carr, again. We touched on him when we talked about Amari Cooper. This guy is just a gamer. He's such a leader. He's a great quarterback. And I think the Raiders are going to be even better offensively this year than they were last year with Lynch. And I think he's just going to have a field day this year.
Yeah, I think number 10, you can't really go wrong with him, honestly. As a QB1, it's tough seeing him as your starter because last year he wasn't a starter, but he ended up getting really good towards the end of the year, right? The best case scenario for Derek Carr is he sustains the level of production he had in the beginning of the year. He really trailed off towards the end, and he got hurt, obviously. Hopefully the addition of Marshawn Lynch opens things up for him. I think it will. I think Amari Cooper will get more mature this year, and Crabtree will still be kind of a touchdown guy there. So I think he definitely will be top 10, but I think he's in the later part. I would still rather have Mariota, who has a lot more upside to me, than Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr has a ton of upside. And now I'm looking at my rankings. I think I might want to change him with Cam Newton. Put Cam Newton as 10. Or maybe Dak Prescott as 10. I have those 2 guys at 8 and 9, and you have the same ones too. Those guys are the talent level is definitely there. I just think they need to be more consistent. Dak Prescott, I think defenses will start to figure him out. Cam Newton, defense is kind of started to figure him out, right? He kind of got hurt. His level of play and physicality, kind of makes him get hurt a lot. But I think those 2 guys are late, QB1 guys.
Yeah, for me, Dak, I agree. I think defense will start to figure him out, but I don't think it'll really matter too much because if you stop Dak, it doesn't mean you're going to stop the Cowboys. I think their offensive line and their running game are so dominant that Dak's just going to find those little cracks to throw play action passes to Dez or play action passes to Terrence Williams or, whoever else. Or, maybe Zeke gets a little bit more active in the passing game this year. So I think Dak will be okay. I think he'll be, again, a late QB1, and I think you want somebody else to kind of pair with him. But I feel pretty good about having him with maybe a Marcus Mariota. Then you say, okay, I got these two dynamic young quarterbacks that, have high upsides. I think that's a pretty good pairing. And then again, as you touched on with Cam has shown that he could be a QB1 level player when he is healthy and when he is locked in and when he's got targets
mentally
available.
in it. Yeah.
Lately, I think last year you saw them regress. This year, I think we saw more of what that team actually is, which is an 8 to 11 win team. They're not going to go 15-1 every year.
No.
I think Kelvin Benjamin being overweight really hurts him, honestly, enough to have me consider dropping Cam from my top 10 because, outside of Olsen and now McCaffrey, I don't know who he's throwing the ball to. So I think that scares me a little bit. I think McCaffrey will help in the in the passing game, but I don't know.
It's not going to help Cam a ton though. That's
exactly.
the thing. Like it's not going to help his stats out, right? It's a really cute pick. I don't love the pick, to be honest. I think it's good for the team. It's not like top 8 good for it. I think it'll open things up for Jonathan Stewart, who still should be the bell cow guy, to be honest, not McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey's really talented, but it's not going to, I don't think is going to be the difference between Cam being a number 1 or 2 quarterback compared to number 10. I think it's all noise at that point. Kelvin Benjamin needs to lose weight. There needs to be a lot of things that go right for Cam this offseason still for him to be still in the top 10, honestly. He might be on the outskirts there where you need to be drafting a guy and then have him as your backup. I think that's what we need to start talking about.
Yeah, the more you talk about Mariota, the more I think I would rather have Mariota than Cam this year. I think his offensive line's better. He honestly, Cam gets all the news for running the ball, but Mariota runs the ball more than he does. And I think that just improves his floor to a point where I think it's higher than Cam's floor. I think we saw Cam's floor at times last year, and it wasn't very pretty to look at. I think I'm going to have to think about this ranking and kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think another guy that we didn't talk about, or two guys that I want to talk about too, before we wrap it up, are Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Who I think gets a little knocked this year with the loss of Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. And also Jameis Winston, who I think will be an elite guy. I think he could have the type of ceiling that Marcus Mariota has too, Jameis Winston. Mike Evans is there. Deshaun Jackson is now there to open things up. He has O.J. Howard. He has a ton of targets. Hopefully Doug Martin, who's in good offseason shape, will come back to his bell cow kind of days to alleviate pressure. That defense will be pretty good. I think that's going to be a pretty underrated team. And Jameis Winston could easily surpass Cam Newton in the top 10 for me. So I think that's a guy that, look on the outside looking in, Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins could vault into the top 10 instead of Cam Newton or Dak Prescott to me.
Yeah, I really like Winston, and again, as you just mentioned, I like Mariota too. I think that those two guys coming out the same year, I think it's really interesting that they're kind of both starting to pop at the same time. For me, I have Cousins at number 10, and he's really here because he was, if people don't realize, the number 5 overall quarterback last year. I think he has an elite quarterback guru coach in Jay Gruden. He had great targets last year. He still has Jordan Reed. I think Terrell Pryor will be all right this year. So I think he gets this, he slips down to 10. Again, I think he's a pretty talented guy in a very good system that's going to put up numbers.
Yeah, this is a make it or break it year for him, right? They put him on the franchise tag the past 2 years. They're trying to get a long-term deal, but I don't think they're completely sold on him. So I think now they have the less targets, which vaults him out of the top 10 for me. I'm probably not going to draft him. I'm not going to draft him as my QB1. I would rather have Mariota or one of these other guys, Jameis Winston even. Maybe he's like a 15 guy for me. I don't think he's going to prove that he can stay the starter there, but I think he's a very good starter in the NFL, and he'll have a job maybe in San Francisco or New York for the Jets next year. I don't think he's going to get a long-term deal. I think he'll come out of the top 10 because of those targets that he lost. I think it's just too much for him to overcome.
Yeah,
and especially with no running game too. That's the other thing.
Oh, exactly. And I'm just looking at this now. We have our just missed top 10, which we'll get into it at a later date. There's a guy that I'm adjusting my rankings on the fly here. Only the best for you listeners. I'm taking Kirk Cousins out of the top 10, and I'm putting Matt Stafford in there. Honestly, I'll put Matt Stafford ahead of Dak and Cam. I think Matt Stafford has really come on with Jim Bob Cooter as his offensive coordinator. Great name. Elite offensive coordinator name.
That's
Absolutely.
a top 10 name. That's our top 10 names. Jim Bob Cooter.
But I think throwing the Golden Tate and Marvin Jones, and he's got Eric Ebron there, and just him being the player he is, I think I'd feel more comfortable with Matt Stafford than I would with Dak Prescott or Cam Newton or Kirk Cousins. As with him being my first guy in a pair. I still think if I take Stafford, I'm not saying okay, I'm set at quarterback. That's reserved for the guys in front of him. But if I take him and I grab a guy later, I feel better than if Dak or Cam is my QB1 option.
He has a higher floor, right?
Exactly.
Dak, he's unproven. We don't know Dak. We really don't. Like, he was on a really good team. Zeke was the guy there. Let's say hopefully this doesn't happen, but let's say Zeke goes down with some injuries next year, and they have to rely on Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris to carry the rock. I think they'll still be fine because that offensive line is so good. But then it's really on Dak, and he's got to overcome that. We don't really know Dak. Again, like, he took over from Tony Romo, and then right in the middle of the season, when Romo was healthy again, they were starting to talk about, maybe they should put Romo in. Defenses are figuring Dak out. So you're right. I would rather have Matt Stafford, who has a much higher floor. We know what he's all about, and he's going to throw a ton with Jim Bob Cooter's offensive scheme. I would rather have him than Dak, actually. Yeah, I think you're right. Higher floor, more consistency.
Yeah, so that wraps up our top 10 rankings for running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback. We should be getting into our guys that just missed out on the top 10 rankings next week, as well as a little bit of a preview of our top 40 overall players.
This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by the Finance Guy Jargon Decoder. Sometimes when I talk to my friends who work for Bloomberg and Morgan Stanley, I get the feeling that something is not okay. It just seems as if there's pain beneath the surface and I can't reach them. And my friend the other day was telling me things, and he starts saying something about a liquidity ratio, and he said if your net present value isn't equal to your PE ratio, then your asset turnover and cost of debt ratio creates current liabilities for your fixed assets. And I just wanted to shake him and just tell him it's going to be all right. You don't have to hold in whatever it is that you're hiding. And I started to get worried. He was in deep. He was trying to tell me I don't know. But I used the Finance Guy Jargon Decoder, and we finally were able to just talk it out, just like old times down by the creek, and we hit the body. And it's all thanks to Finance Guy Jargon Decoder, but I'm never gonna forget that moment. Finance Guy Jargon Decoder.
Yeah, that's all. Thanks for listening. Rob, how do you think we did?
Real bad.
Real bad? Wow,
Just awful.
Just bad.
Who's going to get more home runs this year? Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers?
I'd say Jimmy Bickle.
Oh, all right. Well, see you later.
Well, see you later.
Well, see you later.